I'm not going to lie to you guys. This was one of the hardest lists I've ever had to make. I had the hardest time cutting things out of the top 10 here. It's almost like trying to say, hey, if you got 10, you've got 12 kids, but you can only pick 10 of them. That's kind of what it felt like to me here. But let's go ahead and talk about these top 10 Michael Crichton novels. Hey, what's up, bookworms and hopefully Michael Crichton fans? If you haven't read Michael Crichton, I hope maybe this can kind of push you over the edge. Michael Crichton, who I consider to be one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, and besides Stephen King, probably my personal favorite storyteller of all time. I have everything that the man did under his own name on hardcover here. Just to let you guys know right off the bat, this will be just about Michael Crichton books. I will not be counting any that he wrote under the pseudonym of John Lang. So that'll be something for another time, and honestly I haven't read all those, and so that's on me. But again, I've talked at length on here about why I think that you should read Michael Crichton, how important this author was to me as a teenager growing up in the 1990s when Crichton was really on his hot streak, and how influential his writings were to me as a person. So again, it's not hyperbole when I say it was very hard for me to make this list, because there's going to be lots of cuts on here that people are like, hey, what about this one? Hard. And I feel like this list will probably change, this time next month. It'll probably change again. But for now, what we're going to do is just talk about my top 10 Michael Crichton novels. And again, this is just my opinion. If you disagree, I encourage you, instead of telling me why I'm wrong, to drop in the comments and let me know what your top 10 would be. Let's go ahead and kick it off with number 10, guys. This is The Great Train Robbery. I think a reason for that is, besides Jurassic Park, this was the first Michael Crichton book that I ever read. Once I read Jurassic Park and said, okay, I'm interested in reading more of this man's work. I mentioned in my Stephen King videos that I had a bomb-ass library at my high school, and they had everything that he had written up to that point. So I went and started reading them in publication order, and I started with The Great Train Robbery. And I think that this is just one of those, it'd be a nice quick hit for you if you want to just kind of jump on. You're not wanting anything too thought-provoking, because a lot of his stuff is very thought-provoking, a lot of science involved. It's just a good time. I don't think that you'll have any struggles reading this one, and it's very short. You won't have any problems reading it. Very, to me, kind of Butch and Sundancey kind of thing. Fun. Just a fun book. And I think that's the only one I can say on here that I would use that description. But yeah, I put that one on here because I think that that's a good, it's hard for me not to, I'm not gonna lie, guys, there's gonna be some nostalgia on this list, okay? I haven't read a lot of these since I was in high school, so there is going to be some nostalgia involved. I'm trying to be as objective about this as I can, but I just let you know that sometimes I will say something like, hey, I have fond memories of reading this book in my high school library as a freshman in high school when I knew nobody in a new city. So that might be a reason why. But again, I'm never going to say why I think that would be a bad place for you to start. Next up, number 9, we're going to go with State of Fear. Now, this is a book that's very controversial. It's more controversial now than it was then, because people's opinions on climate change are at an all-time high right now. And I'm not good at getting into that because I'm not that kind of channel. But for me, with this book, it wasn't as much as his opinions about climate change as much as what he talked about how the media feeds on our fear. They love to scare us and control us through fear, because it helps boost their ratings. And guys, what's going on in the world right now? All you gotta do is watch the news for a few minutes and say, hey, you know what? He might not have been wrong. But again, that's all a matter of opinion and how you see things. To me, I love that he was one of the first people really calling that out, calling out the media kind of fabricating some things to always try to scare us into doing what they want us to do, and how beliefs matter over actual scientific fact. The man's a scientist, so he wasn't afraid to bring those things up. But I think that was the theme that really made this book stick with me, when a lot of my friends who were real big into climate change were really pissed off when they read this. But I mean, I enjoyed it for what it was, and the man's allowed to have his opinions. I'm not ever gonna, he's a scientist, and like I always say, I'm just a dude with Wi-Fi, so I'm not gonna get too much into that. Number 8, Rising Sun. This is one I didn't expect to like, because I think it gave me a view of, the Eastern world that I had never seen before. It was a very political book in a way that, like I said, it showed me things that I wasn't used to as just, your normal teenage kid living in the suburbs. It was stuff that I had never even considered. And I felt like he did a good job of peeling the curtain back at that and not being afraid to talk about some of those things. And that made that one a very, very thrilling read. Very, I haven't read a lot of the Jack Ryan novels, but a lot of people have compared that one to a Jack Ryan novel. So I don't know if you guys will let me know if you think that has any kind of similarity. For number 7 here, this might be a controversial pick to some. I love Disclosure. I think what I liked about Disclosure, and I'm not talking about that horrible movie adaptation, I'm talking about the actual book here. Not only did he predict databases and e-readers in this book, I love that he not afraid to present the idea that, sexual harassment in the workplace, it can go both ways. And it got him in trouble. A lot of think pieces went out about him after this book. But again, it was like, hey, we're talking about equality all the time. We're talking about, pay equality, things like that. Why can sexual harassment in the workplace not work both ways? So I think it was one of those things that said that sexual harassment is not a masculine thing or a feminine thing. It goes both ways. And I think that was something he wasn't afraid to talk about. And I will always respect the man for that. Because as someone who has been assaulted by the opposite sex before, I appreciated that. But that's a story we won't get into right now. Number 6, and here's where we start getting into the really, really iconic ones that a lot of you will probably know the name of. I don't actually have the full copy of it. I got a collection here, and I'm talking about Congo. Congo might be the most upset I've ever been in a movie theater. That or the Pet Sematary 2019 adaptation, because this book is just phenomenal. An action thrill ride, all the kind of things that you would expect in the techno thrill that he became famous for. In that movie, I don't know what they were going for. I don't know if they were going for some kind of sci-fi action adventure or what. That's not what this book was at all. His books always were based on science. And it basically took the science out of that movie and it made it about lasers and crystals that made these laser guns work. And I don't know. But anyway, talking about the book, I think it's one of his finest ideas about, communicating with simian races and things. It's really, really neat things that I don't think anybody else was doing at the time. So again, I'm not saying that the man, he created all of these themes and ideas. It was the first that I had read them. And so that's why it was always a big one to me. But yeah, Congo is just awesome from beginning to end. And that movie was boring for an hour and 50 minutes and then 10 minutes of convoluted action at the end. It was, not the same. So I'm not going to talk about the movies too much, because if I did, the next one would be really bad. But I think besides Stephen King, I think that maybe he has the worst movie adaptations of any author out there. And that's saying quite a bit. This one might be a little high for some people, because I know a lot of people put this one down when it came out, which to me, it just completely melted my brain when it came out. I'm talking about Timeline. I love the idea of time travel. What science fiction fan or fantasy fan doesn't love the idea of time travel in their stories? And when you have someone with the brain the size of Michael Crichton writing about time travel, it presented so many new ideas to time travel that I never would have thought of. And then it gives you like your fantastical period piece story at the same time. What's not to like? I've always loved Michael Crichton. I was like, I never felt like he was going to write anything fantastical, swords and shield. So it was just such a cool little twist there. But again, his ideas on time travel, I felt like were different from everything. It wasn't using the Back to the Future rules. It had its own set of rules and things. And I felt like they were based on his scientific studies. What I love about his books is he would take this heavy scientific ideas and put it in layman's terms, where a 15-year-old kid who had never done anything in his life other than play Nintendo could understand. And that's what I've always loved about his writings. And Timeline is a perfect example of that. I want to revisit this one so bad and see how it holds up, because I haven't read since it was brand new. But again, like I said, at the time reading that, it melted my mind, man. I could not tell you how much I got out of that book here. Another one in this collection, and this is number 4. This is Eaters of the Dead. What I like about this one, epistolary. There's epistolary format, and that's kind of like Bram Stoker's Dracula, where it's like basically a found footage book, where it's told off of journal entries and things like that. But it has some of the most terrifying villains that he has ever wrote. The beasties in this are horrifying, man. They will really, really haunt your dreams. So I think it's like the closest he's ever come to writing a horror story. We'll kind of talk about maybe one more here in a minute. But yeah, man, it's just the adventure through the wild, through the Amazon kind of thing that I think that descent into madness, almost like an apocalypse now, but through the eyes of someone writing like in their journal. I don't want to spoil it because there's so many good things for you here, guys, but I feel like that one doesn't get talked about enough. That got adapted into a movie that actually wasn't terrible, but it was called 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. It wasn't quite the same as a book, but it kept the same ideas. I think it's probably one of the more faithful adaptations of one of his books, at least in my memory. At least in my memory. I know a lot of these guys I want to revisit. And the whole reason I'm doing this video, guys, is to kind of gauge interest in that. I want to, what I do with Stephen King with my Into the Multiverse, where I'm doing them all in publication order under his own name and reviewing them. I'd love to do that with Michael Crichton next and kind of go through and reread a lot of these because I haven't read them since a teenager and see if this list will change. Who knows? Number 3, Sphere. I think Sphere has one of the most amazing endings I have ever read in a book. I've had so many friends who read that and like, oh, I thought it was great up until the ending. I'm like, are you crazy? I thought the ending was magnificent. You want to talk about a book completely blowing your mind. I hear everything about these sci-fi novels. Oh yeah, the ideas in that book just completely changed the way I think. Like Sphere? I mean, Sphere, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, I don't want to tell you. I just say, guys, if you haven't read Sphere, I think you need to jump on it right now because I talked about it a lot more in that Why You Should Read Crichton video because I don't want to give too much away. But again, man, think about wrapping your mind around that story as a 15-year-old. That was like on God Emperor of Dune levels of holy shit. Reading it at that age, man, I can't say enough about that book. Just like I can't say enough about number 2, and that is The Andromeda Strain. The Andromeda Strain is the very first Michael Crichton book that I ever read, and I didn't think about that until I actually started doing these videos. I thought that Jurassic Park was the first one I ever read. I read The Andromeda Strain years before as a preteen. Found it in my brother's room at the time. I was soaking up anything that I could, sci-fi and fantasy, that was in my brother's room. That was my only gateway. You know, we grew up pretty poor, so I wasn't going and buying books. I wasn't the library at the time. They didn't have books like that for me to check out. You know, they were still wanting me to read stuff like Berenstain Bears, you know, but yeah, I was always a early reader, obviously. After I read The Hobbit, it just kind of opened that new world for me of reading everything that was probably above my grade level at the time. And when I read The Andromeda Strain, it was the first time I'd ever seen that whole, like, you know, virus ending the human race kind of thing, that kind of story. It's something that I feel like has been copied or parodied or just straight up, you know, infringed upon so many times since. But yeah, very first science fiction book I ever read. So of course, it's going to kind of be in my nostalgia just a little bit. I'm going to try to reread this year because I'm doing a focus on sci-fi on the channel this year. Or I don't want to say in focus, but like an increased focus. I'm still going to be a lot of fantasy too. But I think if I'm going to squeeze in a Crichton book this year, it's going to be Andromeda Strain because I'd love to revisit it because, like I said, I was a preteen the last time I read it, but I just remember absolutely loving it, just being enthralled with it. And it was a lot of things that when Stephen King's The Stand came out, it kind of made me think of the Andromeda Strain just in a much different way. You've probably deduced what number 1 is at this point, and I know you're probably groaning out loud. Oh, that's always going to be the trendy pick. Well, look, credit where credit is due. Jurassic Park is an incredible book. It still is. Reread it in 2017. I would read it again. It's much more scary, I think, than the movie is. And the thing was, is like you think about that movie, what Steven Spielberg made, which is an amazing movie. It's aged incredibly well. It's different, but it's still, you know, very much the heart of the story there. But the thing was, a lot of people don't know, is that he outbid James Cameron for that movie. And James Cameron wanted to make it a horror story, kind of like what the book is. You know, dinosaurs are very scary. You know, I think that was something that they tried to focus on in the last Jurassic World movie. Just maybe it didn't land quite the way that they were hoping it would. But back to the book here. Jurassic Park was my gateway. You know, I read Andromeda Strain, like I said, but I never thought about Michael Crichton again. And I think when I read Andromeda Strain, I didn't even know who Michael Crichton was or what it was or who he was or why he was. I didn't even consider things back then. When that one came out, I went to the bookstores like everyone else. I'm like, well, hell, I want to read this book. And I mean, it was everywhere. And that was when I really just dove into his works. I loved Jurassic Park so much. You know, I think it's in boys' DNA from about the age of 2 to 50 we are obsessed with dinosaurs. We were always going to love dinosaurs. So it's the kind of story I think if I had ever came up with a neat idea once in my life, that would have been it. Was something like bringing dinosaurs back to life. And the way that he did it in a scientific method, like he always did, made it believable. Most books would have been like, oh yeah, there was like a temporal displacement in time, and dragons walked through a portal. With this, he actually talks about, can you create life? Should man play God? So many themes in this book, more so than you think of just life finds a way. It's aged wonderfully, and I can't tell you enough about how wonderful that book is. There's a reason why Lost World isn't on this list, because I felt like Lost World, he was so influenced by the movie that he changed what he was going to write with Lost World to kind of appease what Steven Spielberg did in the movies. And I don't think that's hard information to find. You can find it out there with the whole Ian Malcolm thing. But again, great book. And like I said, I know a lot of people are going to be like, I can't believe you put that as your number one. Again, it might be nostalgia. I don't know. But like I said, I reread it and I thought it was just as brilliant then as it was when I was 15. So I can't say enough about it. And guys, that is my top 10 Michael Crichton novels. A list I'm sure will change many a time. But yeah, again, if there is enough interest on the channel for Michael Crichton material, I would love to do Into the Multiverse version for his books. I'll have to come up with a fancy name for his, since it isn't exactly the same kind of shared universe. But I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I think my old Michael Crichton videos got about like 10,000 views. So there's some interest out there. For me, it's more about getting new readers to enjoy Michael Crichton, because I feel like he's almost on the verge of being forgotten at this point. He died in 2008. And, once the movie's right, I know they're making Westworld still going on HBO, I think, which is based off of his idea. He made that movie, Westworld, the original movie of Westworld, which you could see was the seeds for Jurassic Park, if you pay any attention to it. And, of course, they're going to keep making Jurassic Park movies forever, I think. But it's one of those things I feel like he's starting to be forgotten. And I don't want that to happen because, like I said, besides Stephen King, he's probably my favorite author ever here. So I hope you will pick some of his books up. And if you need any pointers or suggestions, please hit me up. I would love to talk to you about them. So guys, have you read this much Michael Crichton? Please drop in the comments and let me know what you think, what your favorite books are, and if you'd like to be reading them if you haven't yet. And I will talk to you guys there.